Good morning, everyone. Why is that in my head? Right, I've just went to begin. We're about to look at something called the threat funnel. When fear plays the same old tune, right? This is a presentation looking at the neuroscience behind dysregulated AuDHD children and teenagers and looking to dismantle patterns of behavior that have become embedded due to inappropriate care or inappropriate experiences in the past, and consequently them disrupting evolution. So we are directly addressing the disruption and correcting it, right? And we do that by looking at the neuroscience and the body and merging that knowledge to create a clear pathway of evolution for AuDHD, which is body-mind connection centric. Okay, so that's the summary. I'm going to get straight to it. This presentation is really cool. I like this one today. I'm excited to bring it to you. That's background. I'd like it to go like that this time. Right, share. Right, I believe we have done what I wanted to do this time, which is lovely. Let's get to the presentation. Excuse me 1 second, just making sure everything's up where it needs to be. Okay, slideshow. Okay, so we're going to be looking at the threat funnel. When fear plays the same old tune, AuDHD and integration of fear and relaxation of protected patterns. Now, this is going to be really interesting to anyone who's been following this stuff with me, because it really needs looked at for these children. AuDHD as it stands is not appropriately supported in mainstream schooling, and we are designing a curriculum and an education model which includes the whole child, and part of that is looking at all the different ways that their unique profile is intercepted or disrupted by generalized approaches and making it more individual. So neuroception and dancing with the devil. Now, unconscious fear or panic takes us into a threat funnel. It's a narrowing of perception where a bullseye is in close focus and the brain, nervous system and perception wraps around the bullseye. This threat, neuroception, remains unconscious, but we start dancing to a music only we can hear, and we dance along to the exact same tune throughout the whole of our lives. So in the first instance of a threat of this size being confronted in our lives, we develop a pattern that never resolves itself. Now, I'm using music to explain how this works because it's a simplification of the neuroscience. So where does the music come from? Somewhere there was a complex layering of autonomic nervous system states, reactions and beliefs embedded in us between the ages of 0 to 7 years old. Every single time we detect threat, we project that exact same reality into our world and see around the bullseye only affirmative proof that this same reality is playing out. Only we don't know we're doing this, and we are dancing with the devil, which is right out of every opportunity, growth point and new experience in our later life. And these patterns continue to happen. With those who with a considerable structural dissociation in AuDHD, you see these patterns play out constantly, and they will be very, very fixed, particularly in the narcissist and borderline patterning of behavior. They start to break through what I'm about to explain to you today, and the patterns permanently change, opening the child to permanent evolution of consciousness and permanent stabilization of the nervous system. Not said lightly. So it looks an awful lot, right, like, hold on, wait a second. It looks an awful lot like this, okay? So we're open, relaxed, flexible, and suddenly the alarm goes off. But we don't notice that the alarm has gone off. We all do this to a degree, so I'm addressing everyone here, right? Our perception narrows to fix itself around the perceived threat, and the music starts to play, right? And this is pretty much what happens when the threat activates beyond the level of our conscious awareness. Now, usually the scapegoat is present and out front. So when the child feels the threat, they are feeling a threat against an all-powerful enemy. There's an all-powerful threat that is exposing itself to them, and they cannot see nor access any cognitive or social choices in this dysregulated state that will get them out of the pattern they're stuck in. Now, this is really unhealthy, so I'm going to explain how it's unhealthy, what actually happens internally, and how we can start to correct that for the child. Now, the threat funnels were activated and embedded when resolution was impossible. And as we've spoken about before, resolution... Yeah?
We're all done.
Oh, are you? Oh, amazing. Thank you very much. I'm very sorry I can't stop what I'm doing.
Do you know how your water heater works?
Yeah, you just flick the things down.
Yeah,
I'm on a live call right now.
Sorry, do you want them both lift on before that?
Yes, please. That'll be lovely. Thank you very much for your help. See you later. Bye. Anyway, right. So the threat funnels were activated and embedded when resolution was impossible, right? So, and as we've spoken before, resolution means reflection, emotional processing in order for the body and mind to connect again, and then for new neural pathways to open up. So the correction of a blockage is impossible until this process starts again. So it keeps repeating in our adult life until that opportunity opens. So the child is reliving complete disempowerment under an all-powerful enemy and continues to replay that every time the threat funnel is opened. And it's a little like a ballerina going around on the top of a jewellery box. She's just going round and round on this pattern of pathway, and she just keeps following that pathway. One of my fixed threat funnels was fawning, right? Where I could be in a dangerous circumstance and I'm there acting like nothing's wrong. And I could be in extreme dysregulation underneath, and I'm being given, kind, respectful, generous, and then eventually some part of me, because there's an internal conflict there, starts freaking out out of nowhere, and nobody knows where the freaking out's coming from. And it's because of being too long put under the pressure of a false identity. And the problem was these identities run us. So what we have to do is we dissolve and integrate fear, dissolve the enemy. So we get internally to the fear, make everything that's happening about us, right? So what are we experiencing here inside of this threat funnel? It's about me. I have to get into the emotion, release the emotion, and the enemy threat starts to loosen. It doesn't go away immediately, but over time, the child will start to experience more flexibility in their heart rate variability, more flexibility in their autonomic states, and the context of those autonomic states becomes more complex, right? So they're not just going from extreme activation to collapse, right? So the goal here is regulated self-empowerment, and it might take time. So just wait a second while all that catches up. By the way, that disruption was from a lovely electrician. Apparently I made the electricians responsible for the fact that my flat's not clean today. I just told them off on the right, because you said you weren't going to be here today, blah, 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 blah. Sometimes I wonder, because I've been out of Ireland for 15 years and I am still as much an Irish mommy as I could ever be. I catch myself at this all the time. So funny. Right, so where fear is activated under the level of conscious awareness, these masks or these false identities come in and the threat funnel starts and the silly ballerina does her dance, irrespective of what reality is actually doing. So what we're seeing here is a complete disconnect from reality itself. And this is happening inside of AuDHD children all the time. And I have my mental picture of them in the corridor arguing with teachers, right? And we'll talk about why that's happening. So the AuDHD child will move through a series of protective and protected patterns. And when I say protected patterns, it means they don't see any other out, so they continue with this loop, which are wrapped around the true feelings of the child. This is the past playing out again to no effect. So there's a conflict where the central self is present. The true self is present and starts to and is in resistance, doesn't really want to be doing the ballerina dance to this music, but they're being overtaken by automated behaviours and they have to stop. Emotion can't be released, and the false aspect, a child self from the past, which is running the show, won't loosen its grip on the child until fear is actively identified and a new choice is made. Now, these sorts of patterns can be so embedded that fear is not showing up. rage and panic is not showing up externally, but it is very much present, and we might not be aware of it at all. So here's a summary of where all this is coming from on a scientific level, but I want to just present it to you simply here via image and metaphor, because that's what I do. Now, so when polyvagal theory is blended with the doctrine of autonomic space, we are offered contextual variance in dysregulation. Each threat funnel is a mask. The real child is beneath them, accessible and available for evolution. How we handle the threat funnels changes the system. So internal conflict begins between the central self and the robotic actions. So protected patterns in the threat funnel may be held in place by false beliefs, i.e. a good person would do this, irrespective of potential dangers. Like that was me. I would get got by guilt and shame around being a good person. So someone could be holding a knife to my throat and I would be there going, here's my handbag, here's £20, do you want a cup of tea? And acting like that's perfectly fine. Because that's how I was conditioned. I completely disconnected from fear when I had it. Right? And I would act like whatever was going on wasn't there, and my automated reaction was fawning, right? Because I've been terrified, right, of confrontation, and then also terrified of being called unstable, because I had this pattern of if I spoke authentically, I was unstable, and my faulty belief was that fear inside of me was invalid, that protecting myself, honouring myself was invalid, that I should not be doing that. It showed instability, and therefore I found it very, very hard to actually address unhealthy behaviours without becoming dysregulated, because it was so terrifying to me. And this is the reality that's playing out inside of the child. They have this terrible fear of something awful happening if they acknowledge the fear itself and act from the needs that the fear is presenting. So it's conditioning, and it creates internal conflict as the false self and true self fight against each other. So there's, frustration here. The way to correct it is not to point the finger outward and fix focus on whatever we believe is happening externally. Turn inward and say, what am I frustrated about within myself right now? What would I truly rather be doing, whether it's considered good, bad or not, right? If I remove the false idea of there being this oppressive power over me, some oppressive power that has the capacity to obliterate me, if I take away that lie, is it aligned to what I really feel or want? And what action feels more true of who I really am? So returning the child to the central self, right? And bringing to conscious awareness the central self underneath these threat funnels, right? What we're doing at schools at the minute is we're punitively punishing these children, and they remain inside those threat loops, and the chronic dysregulation remains, and we judge them according to these masks, and it's not real, right? So let's wait for the title just to pop up here. Signs child is stuck in a threat funnel. So just pay attention to these. Rumination, they're being obstinate. There's a refusal to let go of the pattern. They think this is the only way because there are no other choices. And that's absolutely not true. Not true at all. I'm going to keep saying it until it registers. An uneasy, humiliated feeling is within them, or humiliating feeling that they are betraying themselves. Total incapacity to identify fear or pride that's been activated. They can't see it. They don't know why they're doing what they're doing. They're unaware any other choice is possible, and yet still unhappy. It's extremely dissatisfying, but they're still doing the same things. They continue to attempt wrong actions despite obvious distress, harm, or sabotage of their real needs and real wants and desires. The overthinking is major. Right. Now, I've lifted Johnny 5 from the film Johnny 5 is Alive. Now, I don't know if it's called Johnny 5 is Alive, but that's what I called it when I was young, and I loved that film so much. So good, right? And here's where he starts freaking out. No, disassemble 5, right? And this is kind of what we're doing. We're activating awareness of the fears so these robotic behaviours can start to collapse. So what looks outwardly like a behaviour problem or moral issue, is in fact just a well-established pattern from the past. In a way, the avoidance or shaming of fear, panic, or rage will cause these patterns. They just can't feel those feelings. And they're fully justified in that because they can't see it. The behaviours are faulty and the body-mind wants the collapse to happen so the emotion will get processed. So they keep repeating it because the body's like, we need you to feel this, right? But the mind's going, nothing to feel because I'm disconnected from myself. I have no idea there's anything wrong. And I'm just going to keep going, and just, it's never going to get them anywhere, right? So they've, internally, right, and this is something I used to do with my masking patterns and habits, it was fawning and flight, right? Get away from harm rather than address it, right? We have just accepted a lower state of functioning and over time resentment builds. So a lot of resentment sits around these behaviours and we tend to point it at this external oppressive enemy, not realising that it's actually about us and the fact that we believe in our own disempowerment here. And it's not really true. Also, if anybody knows the real title of Johnny Five's life, please let me know. Now, the threat funnel and how to come out of it. Here's an example of what actually happens here. So there's unconscious fear-based action, repetition. And this goes on forever. Unconscious fear-based action, repetition equals no result, just harm, right? Harm and chaos. Because it's never resolved, they're trying to resolve something internally that needs to be felt through at depth, addressed at depth. The result to correct it is this: unconscious action plus reflection plus regulation equals ventral vagal safety. It's called the healthy pause. Very, very hard to do once this unconscious threat is activated, and why co-regulation is so important. So when in the school system that we create, co-regulation will be a regular thing. We're giving the children mirrors of safety and partnered up with key workers who will reflect back at them the state that they can sense and see is occurring, so then they can address that from their true state, because that's where the central self lives, right? The central self is with our real feelings of shame, guilt, fear, panic, that's the real us. And we should act from vulnerability and honesty, at least to ourselves, honest with ourselves, right? What does this feel like? What can I do to correct it, right? So fear integrated and pause extended equals new choices, and the loop collapses. These cognitive and social choices we anticipate from children when they're in a threat funnel is impossible. Now, unconscious fear and the sense of powerlessness. If this pattern is heavily embedded, a belief holds it in place. The child is being told they have no choice, they are powerless, and will continue to accept this unhappy reality for themselves until they are met with safety, respect, and acceptance. Power exists where we reveal fear, honour the child inside of us with new choices, and say no or yes with our whole chest, irrespective of what anyone thinks about us or what we perceive people will think about us. Our child state is gone, and the boogeyman is also gone. Really, really. So flipping the script. This is something we can do inside of schools. I want to embed inside of the secondary education for sincerity schools a regular peer-to-peer proactive repatterning where we teach children to communicate with each other on conflict like this from a proactive place, so they're constantly assessing their circumstances from their central self and collapse and threat loops together. And the aim is to show that resolution that is safe is possible. Once ventral vagal safety is restored, and that can be done with breath work, with connecting to the heart, right, slowing the body, removing them from overstimulating environments, allowing them time in nature, taking care of them with gentleness and presence, the child can identify that distress is something that they can process and let go of. Here are choices that arrive as a result. Boundaries, saying no, giving only what feels right to, creating limits and safety around their own experience. Pulling away from or leaning into what feels right and aligned with who they really are. Anything lost after this patterning is collapsed was never real to begin with, and what it's replaced with is infinitely more powerful, healthy, expansive, and aligned to something greater. Now, proactive action and peer-to-peer scripts, closing the loop for good. So here are some examples of what that would look like with the children, okay? So peer-to-peer scripts, these are teaching them things they can say to create new pathways internally, where the threat is gone, the fear's been acknowledged, or the panic's been acknowledged, and they're acting from right choice, from a choice that feels right to them. It mightn't feel right to us, but it feels right to them, and we have to honour the reality they're in and validate that. So I have identified a need and would like A, B and C to no longer happen. Here's what I'm willing to do and here's what I'm not from now on. This makes me feel bad, so I will do this instead. I made a mistake and would like to fix it by. Demonstrate that the past is gone by showing no negative effect when the child makes a healthy choice until all fear is gone. And by doing it peer-to-peer, the hierarchies have been eliminated, right? There's that sense of seeing the world from a place of equality, seeing their own validity, their own importance and placement in the world. They have meaning, place and space fully embedded and integrated. They have a sense of belonging. There's also bonding that occurs. Positive, healthy hormones, oxytocin, serotonin, and all the rest of it, when they are working things out with their peers, with the assistance required to then create new pathways of change for their adult life. Maladaptive behaviour processing comes from inappropriate processing of emotional information, right? And that is a key issue in traumatised children with AuDHD. So waiting for the title on the next one. Oh, excuse me 1 second. Oh yeah, and just to go back on this, I want to go back to this just briefly. Okay, where is it? The child once learned their vulnerability and real feelings were wrong. Show them it's okay to act in support of their real needs. Nothing bad happens. So the child learns that self-advocacy is safe. They learn support is available. They learn their emotional reaction is valid, but not the reactivity which follows. They see and have understood that new choices come when they actively choose better for themselves. It feels very uncomfortable, right? Shaming and suppressing emotion leads to past. Owning them leads to new things and more satisfying outcomes. But this is a process with these children, right? With me reversing the social masks and the threat funnels required confronting where I was extremely uncomfortable holding boundaries, and where I found withdrawal from others, particularly because I experienced this a lot, where silence was used as a weapon, right? So silence from others when I did something they didn't want registered as a wound and would create more dysregulation in me. And I've learned now to hold myself and maintain the safety within me, the regulation within me, required so I can make healthier and stronger and healthier choices, realizing that other people's discomfort is not a concern, nor is it something that I need to carry, because I don't, right? And my reality remains intact and my identity remains intact, and we separate ourselves out from misalignments. They see and have understood that new choices come when they actively choose better for themselves. Shaming and suppressing emotion leads to past, owning them leads to new things and more satisfying outcomes. Children need assistance with this throughout the whole of their growing lives because of neurodevelopmental processing and the need to have safe, healthy adult modelling of the same behaviour. All defensive behaviour is information of a need not being met, which the child can learn how to meet in new healthy ways once validation and support is offered. So how does this inform learning? Fear-free learning environments, we're not using punitive measures, everything is restorative. Ventral vagal safety and nervous system stabilization as part of daily routines. Common, regular and repeated check-ins for all children. How do I feel here? Does my brain agree with my body? Body first decision making until they've evolved into greater and greater self-awareness. If the body doesn't feel good, return to ventral vagal safety through breathwork, nature or connection to self, learning lanes inside of the ages and stages of the school until it is, and then revisiting choices only when healthy connection is restored. So not forcing them to do anything except create safety around themselves and remove themselves from what's too much until new choices are possible, right? It's making the children aware that there's a level of empowerment that is always available no matter how dysregulated they become. No shame, no blame, no guilt, just solutions and what can I do for myself language. The end. Yeah. Okay, so this is a quick one today, right? Looking at a key issue. I'm going to go into it in more depth later in the week. I'm integrating some of this and formulating a process for secondary school, secondary age children specifically. I'll also be back on later this week with a summation of what the BodyMind Connection theory and process actually is, with all of the information into one big presentation, specifically for those who want to learn it off and start to apply this in their own facilities. We have loads of separate videos here and I've just found a phenomenal way to summarise it all, so it's going to be very exciting. Thank you very much for listening. Lovely to have you. Have a lovely day.